Finding a roommate online always feels like a gamble. You hope for quiet nights, shared bills, maybe even friendship. But on Craigslist, you're not just opening your door, you're inviting in a stranger's entire past. A past you know nothing about. Some of them are lonely, some are desperate, and some aren't really looking for a place to stay. From the locked doors at night, to whispers behind thin apartment walls, to messages that kept updating after the sender was gone, these are 7 true Craigslist roommate horror stories that will terrify you. Because sometimes the worst thing in your home isn't what's outside the door, it's who's already sleeping across the hall. Story 1. The Roommate Who Never Slept. They say you never really know someone until you live with them, but sometimes, even then, you never find out who they really are. In 2019, I moved to a small apartment in Portland. It was one of those Craigslist deals that looked too good to be true, $600 a month, utilities included, private bathroom. The ad said, looking for a quiet, respectful roommate. Must be okay with night shifts. That part didn't bother me. I worked late at a bar downtown, so opposite schedules sounded perfect. The guy's name was Eli. He was in his early 30s, quiet, clean, polite, the kind of person you forget is even around. When I came home at 2 or 3 a.m., his door was always closed, lights off. Sometimes I'd hear faint noises from his room, the sound of typing or humming, but I figured he just couldn't sleep. I didn't realize that he actually never did. At first, everything felt normal. We barely spoke, which honestly made things easier. But after a few weeks, small things started to feel off. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see the light under his door always on. When I'd leave for work at 7 p.m., he'd be sitting at the table, drinking coffee, staring out the window. When I got home 8 hours later, he'd still be there. Same mug, same posture. Once, I joked, "Do you ever sleep, man?" He looked up at me slowly, like he had to remember how to make eye contact. "I rest," he said, then smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. About a month in, I started noticing noises late at night, soft footsteps pacing the hallway, the refrigerator opening and closing, a faint scratching sound, like someone running their nails down the walls. One night, I came home and found the living room dark except for the TV. It was on a static channel, volume low, barely audible. Eli was sitting on the couch, eyes open, not blinking. I said his name, no reaction. Then, without looking away from the screen, he said, "I don't like the new lock." I froze. I'd changed the lock on my bedroom door that morning, didn't tell him. Why, I asked. He turned his head slowly. His pupils looked huge, swallowing the color around them. "It makes noise when you close it." The next morning, he was normal again, cooking eggs, smiling faintly like nothing happened. But the more I tried to brush it off, the more things started to spiral. I'd wake up and find things moved, a chair turned toward my door, my toothbrush in a different cup, my shoes placed neatly beside Eli's in the hallway. One night I came home to find every light in the apartment on, every single one. Eli's door was wide open. His room was empty, no bed, no clothes, no furniture. Just the sound of something faint and metallic spinning on the floor. It was a key. My bedroom key. I ran to the door, but before I could touch the knob, the lights flickered and went out. I stood there in the dark, listening. There was breathing, not mine, deep, controlled, deliberate, coming from behind me. I turned around. No one there. But the bathroom door was cracked open and faint light was coming from inside. I took one step closer, then another. The breathing stopped. I pushed the door open. The mirror was fogged, as if someone had been standing there for hours. On the surface, drawn with a fingertip, were 3 words. I rest now. I bolted, ran straight out of the apartment, barefoot, keys still in my pocket. I spent the night at a friend's place. When I went back the next morning, Eli was gone. All his things, what little there were, had vanished. No clothes, no toothbrush, no dishes. Just one thing left behind, a black notebook on the kitchen table. Inside were page after page of handwriting, tight, perfect, uniform, like it had been written by a machine. Every page said the same thing. I rest. Thousands of times. At the very end, a new line appeared. He's learning. I told the landlord everything. He said the last tenant before me had also complained about Eli, how he never seemed to sleep, how he'd whisper through the vents at night. But here's the part that still keeps me awake. He said the man's name wasn't Eli, it was David, and he died in that apartment 2 years before I moved in. Heart failure, found sitting upright on the couch. Eyes open. I moved out that week, but sometimes, when I wake up around 3 a.m., I swear I hear footsteps in my hallway, again slow, deliberate, pausing outside my door. And every time I remember what he said. I rest. Not sleep, rest. Maybe that's what he wanted, or maybe that's what he became. Story 2. The mirror in the spare room. They say every roommate brings something strange with them. Some bring noise. Some bring drama. Mine brought a mirror. In 21, I was living in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago. Rent was killing me, so I posted on Craigslist looking for a roommate, quiet, tidy, stable income, all the usual stuff. A few days later, I got a message from someone named Maya. She said she just moved from Seattle after a breakup, needed a place fast, and didn't have much stuff, just a few boxes and a mirror. When she showed up, she seemed fine, polite, reserved, almost painfully normal. But she wouldn't let anyone else carry that mirror. She wrapped it in a dark cloth, kept it leaned face down against the wall the entire time she moved in. I asked about it once, joking that it must have been expensive. She smiled. "It's sentimental," she said, "but I don't like seeing it at night." For the first few weeks, she kept it in the spare room, door closed, no lights, no sound. But every now and then, I'd walk past that room and feel something a chill, like the air inside was heavier. Once, I thought I saw movement under the door, like shadows shifting even though the lights were off. I told myself it was just bad wiring, old building, drafty walls. Until the scratching started. It was around 2 a.m. when I first heard it, a soft, steady scrape metal against glass, coming from the spare room. I knocked on Maya's door. No answer. She wasn't home. Her car was gone. So I opened the spare room door. The cloth had fallen off the mirror. It was standing upright, facing the doorway, facing me. And on the surface, there were marks. Long, curved scratches, as if someone had been dragging their fingernails across the inside of the glass. I touched it, cold. Colder than the air around it. Then I noticed something else. My reflection was moving, just a little, a fraction of a second out of sync. When I tilted my head, it tilted slower. And when I reached up to touch the surface again, my reflection smiled. I didn't. I slammed the door and backed into the hallway, heart pounding. Every instinct told me to get out, but before I could, I heard a voice from behind the door. "Don't touch it." It was Maya. She'd come home without me noticing. Her face was pale. She pushed past me, closed the door, and leaned against it like she was holding something back. "Did you look at it?" she asked. I hesitated. "Yeah, why?" Her eyes went glassy. "You shouldn't have." That night, she didn't sleep. I heard her whispering through the door for hours. Couldn't make out the words, just her voice, low and trembling. The next morning, the mirror was covered again. The scratches were gone, and Maya wouldn't talk about it. Days went by, but something in the apartment changed. The lights flickered at the same times every night. My phone battery kept draining to 0, even when it wasn't in use. And whenever I walked past the spare room, I could hear faint breathing like someone was standing on the other side of the door, listening. One night, I came home to find Maya sitting in the hallway, crying silently. "It's awake," she said. She pointed to the door. The mirror was uncovered again, but this time, it wasn't reflecting the room. It was showing something else, a hallway, like ours but darker. And, in the reflection, 2 figures stood side by side. Ourselves, but wrong. Their faces were blank, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin. They weren't moving, just waiting. Maya whispered, "It doesn't copy anymore. It watches." I told her we needed to get rid of it. She shook her head. I tried. It comes back. I didn't believe her until we carried it outside. Together, we dragged it down the hall, down 3 flights of stairs, and left it by the dumpster behind the building. We went back upstairs, locked the door, and collapsed in exhaustion. When I woke up the next morning, the mirror was leaning against the wall of the spare room, again perfectly clean, not a single fingerprint on it. That's when I started dreaming about it. Every night, I'd wake up standing in that hallway, the one from the reflection, with my other self standing just a few feet away. Sometimes it spoke, sometimes it didn't, but it always smiled before the dream ended. When I told Maya, she just said, "It's choosing." A week later, she was gone. Her room was empty. No note, no suitcase, just the mirror still standing in the spare room, facing the doorway. I moved out the next day. But before I left, I covered it again with the black cloth, just in case. As I shut the door for the last time, I heard something, a soft whisper, barely audible. "Don't leave me with him!" 2 months later, the landlord called. He said a new tenant had moved in and asked if I'd left anything behind. I said no. He paused, then said, "Well, there's a big mirror in the spare room. They say it's been moving." If you ever rent a room from someone online and they tell you one door stays closed, believe them. Because sometimes your roommate isn't living with you. They're living with what follows them. Story 3. The locked door across the hall. There's something strange about living with a door that never opens. At first, it feels like privacy. Then it starts to feel like a secret. In 2020, I was living in Los Angeles, and I needed a new place fast. Craigslist was full of overpriced holes in the wall, but one ad caught my eye. Private bedroom, shared bath, great view, roommate travels often. The photos looked clean, and the rent was half the city average, too good to ignore. The roommate's name was Caleb, mid-30s, quiet, polite. He said he worked in film production and was barely ever home. The apartment itself was modern hardwood floors, white walls, tall windows that looked out over downtown. But there was one strange thing. A locked door across from my bedroom. I asked about it during the walkthrough. Caleb said, "Oh, that's just storage. Don't worry about it." He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that ends too soon. The first few weeks were fine. Caleb really wasn't home much. Sometimes I'd hear him come in late, but he never made noise, never left a mess. Except for that one door. It was always locked, always cold to the touch, even when the rest of the hallway was warm. Once, I noticed something odd. The doorknob had fresh scratches around the lock, tiny marks, like someone had been trying to open it from the inside. About a month in, I started hearing things at night. Soft thuds, footsteps pacing across the hall, then a sound like whispering right outside my door. I told myself it was Caleb, except he wasn't home. I knew because I'd seen him leave earlier suitcase, jacket, car keys, gone for the weekend. But the footsteps didn't stop. At 2 a.m., I got up and opened my door. The hallway was empty, lights off. Then I noticed the locked door. It was open. Just a few inches, enough for me to see a sliver of darkness inside. And from that darkness, a faint smell like something damp and old. I took one step closer, then another. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing against my chest. I reached for the knob, and the door slammed shut. I jumped back, heart pounding, stared at it for what felt like forever. Then, from behind the door, came a whisper. Not yet. The next morning, Caleb was back, cooking eggs, smiling like nothing had happened. I tried to bring it up casually. "Hey, is there someone else living here?" He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I heard something from the other room." His smile faded. "You didn't open the door, did you?" I shook my head. He stared for a few seconds too long, then said quietly, "Don't ever." After that, things changed. Caleb became more distant, more distracted. He'd sit in the living room with the TV off, just staring at that hallway. Sometimes I'd wake up at night and hear him talking through the door softly, like a parent comforting a child. "I'm here. You'll get your turn soon." Once, I caught him holding the knob with both hands, forehead pressed against the wood, whispering, "It's almost time." 2 weeks later, I came home early from work. The apartment was dark. The locked door was open again. The smell hit me first rot, wet wood, something like rust. I called out his name, no answer. The inside of the room was pitch black. When I turned on my phone flashlight, the beam hit something a wall covered in deep scratch marks, hundreds of them. And in the middle of the floor, a small bed. Not a real bed, a thin mattress, a pillow, and next to it, a plate with food that had gone bad. Someone had been living in there. I backed away slowly. Then I heard a creak. The door began to close again by itself. I shoved it open, and for a split second, I saw something move behind the bed. A figure, small, pale, eyes wide, mouth open. It crawled toward the light, and I saw its hands, long, bone-thin fingers with skin missing around the nails. I dropped my phone and ran. By the time I got back with the police, the door was locked again. No sound inside. Caleb was gone. They broke it open. The room was empty. No bed, no food, no scratches. Just clean walls and a floor covered in fresh dust, like it hadn't been touched in years. The landlord said no one had lived there before me, said the apartment only had one bedroom and a closet, no second room at all. I moved out the next day. But a few weeks later, I got a voicemail, blocked number, distorted voice. "You were right. Someone lives there." I recognized it instantly. Caleb. He sounded tired, faint, like he was calling from far away. Then I heard another voice in the background, a whisper. Your turn. If you ever rent a place and your roommate says one door stays locked, leave. Because some doors don't hide secrets, they hide people, and some of those people never learned how to leave. Story 4. The room swap sharing space with a stranger always feels awkward at first, but swapping bedrooms with one, that's where everything started to go wrong. In 2022, I found a roommate on Craigslist named Lena. She was friendly, clean, and seemed normal enough, the kind of person who smiled too easily, but not in a fake way. We rented a 2-bedroom apartment together in Seattle. The place was cozy old brick walls, big windows, and the kind of warmth that made winter feel bearable. For the first few months, things were fine. We got along great, took turns cooking, watched shows together, even shared playlists. Then, one night, Lena knocked on my door. She looked tired, almost nervous. "Hey," she said, "would you be open to switching rooms?" I laughed. "Why?" "I think I sleep better on that side of the apartment." It felt random, but she was nice, and I didn't really care. We switched that weekend. Big mistake. Her old room was smaller but warmer, somehow. No draft from the window, no creaking pipes. Still, from the first night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in there. The air felt heavier, like someone else was breathing in rhythm with me. I woke up around 3 a.m. The sound of footsteps came from behind the wall, slow, pacing, as if someone was walking in a tight circle. When I asked Lena about it the next morning, she smiled nervously. "Oh, that's just the neighbor upstairs. He's a night owl." Except there was no upstairs. We lived on the top floor. Over the next week, I started waking up in strange positions, my blanket neatly folded, my phone turned off and placed face down on the nightstand. Once, I woke to find the chair in the corner turned toward the bed, like someone had been sitting there watching me sleep. I thought maybe Lena was playing a joke, so I asked her directly. She avoided my eyes. "You shouldn't question it," she said quietly. "It makes it worse." That night, I woke up again at 3:17 a.m. The air was freezing. At first, I thought it was a dream, the kind that feels too real to wake from. The shadows in the room looked wrong. They moved against the light, sliding across the walls like liquid. Then I saw something. A handprint appearing slowly on the inside of the window, like someone was pressing from the outside, leaving streaks of condensation that formed a shape. 5 fingers, too long. I stumbled out of bed, heart pounding, and ran to the living room. Lena was standing there in the dark, facing the wall. "You saw it," she said softly. She told me the truth then. When she moved in, the landlord made her sign an extra agreement, a clause that wasn't in the lease. It said she had to maintain the balance. When she asked what that meant, he told her, "One sleeps, one watches." She thought it was a joke, until the first month. Her dreams started changing. She'd wake up exhausted, as if she hadn't slept at all, and sometimes she'd see me in those dreams, sitting on her bed, watching her. That's why she wanted to switch rooms. I didn't believe her until she showed me something. Under the bed, etched into the wood, were words carved over and over again. "Don't look at the wall." I laughed at first, but that night, the wall began to hum. A low vibration, almost like a generator running inside it. When I leaned closer, the surface rippled, and for a moment, I saw something under the paint. A face, pressed flat, mouth open, screaming soundlessly into the plaster. I screamed. The wall went still. Lena came running in. She grabbed my shoulders. "You shouldn't have looked," she whispered. "Now it knows." That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I blinked, I saw that face behind my eyelids pale, stretched, eyes wide with something like hunger. By morning, Lena was gone. No note, no trace. Her old room was empty again, the bed stripped, the window wide open. But the chair in the corner of my room had moved closer to the bed. I moved out within a week, but before I left, I decided to confront the landlord. When I mentioned the balance clause, his expression didn't change. He just said, "You stayed longer than most." Then he handed me my deposit in cash and told me not to come back. 3 months later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. No message, just a photo. It was the corner of a room, my old bedroom, the chair, the bed, and a faint reflection in the window, like someone was standing behind the glass. The caption read, "Your turn to watch." I blocked the number, changed phones, moved states. But sometimes at night, when I wake up for no reason, I can feel that same cold air in the room. And if I listen hard enough, I can hear that faint vibration in the wall, like something alive, waiting for me to look again. If you ever move into a place and your roommate suddenly wants to switch rooms, don't agree too fast. Because maybe it's not about space or comfort or sunlight. Maybe they've seen something they don't want watching them anymore. Story 5. The ad that wouldn't go away. Craigslist ads are supposed to disappear after 30 days, but some of them never do. They just keep waiting for someone new to click. In 2021, I was between jobs and desperate for cheap rent. That's how I found the ad. It was buried 3 pages deep under rooms and shares. Quiet basement suite available. $400. Must be punctual with rent. Must respect quiet hours. There was one photo, a dimly lit room with stone walls and a single bed. No window, no decorations. Still, it was cheap, and the address was only a few miles from where I worked. I emailed the contact room for rent at post.com. Got a reply 5 minutes later. The room is available. Come after dark. Bring exact rent in cash. Weird, but Craigslist was always weird. When I arrived, the house looked normal enough. 2 stories, quiet street, no lights on except one in the basement. The man who answered the door was tall and polite, dressed in work clothes that looked decades out of date, brown slacks, white undershirt, clean but old. "You're here about the room?" he asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes didn't blink often enough. He led me downstairs. The basement was colder than the rest of the house, smelling faintly of damp concrete and bleach. The room looked exactly like the picture, bare walls, single bulb, metal bed frame. "It's quiet," he said. "You'll have your privacy." "Is there a lease?" I asked. He smiled. "The room takes care of that." I didn't know what he meant until later. The first few nights were fine, too quiet. Maybe. I couldn't hear footsteps upstairs or traffic outside, just the faint hum of that single light bulb. But by the end of the week, I started noticing things. The air never changed temperature, the bulb never burned out, and the man upstairs never came down. The rent envelope I left on the step disappeared each morning, but I never saw him collect it. And when I checked Craigslist again, the same ad was still there, still active. On the 10th night, I woke up to the sound of typing, soft, methodical, coming from somewhere near the ceiling. I stood on the bed and looked at the vent. Faint blue light flickered inside. When I leaned closer, I could see text scrolling black letters against a glowing white background. My Craigslist message thread, every email I'd sent. Except the last one wasn't from me. It read, "I'm still in the room." Then another appeared beneath it. "So am I." I bolted upstairs. The door to the basement was locked. I pounded on it, yelling for the man, but no one answered. When I turned around, the light bulb dimmed. Something in the corner was moving, slowly. A shadow stretching upward from the floor, longer than it should have been. Then a voice, familiar. "You found the ad too." It was my own voice. I ran back to the stairs and slammed against the door. This time it opened easily, like it had never been locked. The house was empty, no furniture, no sign of the man, just dust and silence. When I got outside, the porch light flickered once, then went out. I called my friend Nate to come pick me up. He didn't believe my story, but when we drove past the house again the next day, it was gone. I don't mean demolished. I mean the address didn't exist. Google Maps jumped straight from 1423 to 1427. No house in between. A month later, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. No subject line, no message body. Just a Craigslist link. It was the same ad, same picture, same description. But this time, the contact email was my name. And at the bottom, the location pin read, "Room currently occupied." I deleted my account, changed emails, moved to another state. But every few weeks, a new version of the ad appears, different title, different city, same photo. Friends have sent it to me as a joke, not knowing. Every time they do, the picture looks slightly different, a new shape in the corner, standing a little closer to the bed. The last one they sent showed a shadow sitting on the mattress, its head tilted up toward the camera. And on the desk next to the bed, you could see something small, a phone, screen glowing. The inbox was open, unread messages. The sender's name was mine. People always say Craigslist is full of scams and creeps, but maybe that's not the worst thing on there. Maybe some of those ads don't want your money. Maybe they just want you to look. Story 6. The subletter who wasn't real. Subletting is supposed to be simple. You move out, they move in, and life goes on. But sometimes, life doesn't move on for both of you. In 2020, I had to leave my apartment in Boston for a 3-month work trip. It was small but comfortable, a Craigslist find. I'd held on to for years to save money. I posted the unit for sublet. A few hours later, someone replied. Her name was Claire. Said she worked remotely, needed a quiet place to focus. Her tone was polite, professional, too normal to be suspicious. We did a quick video call. She looked real, had a cat walking across her desk, books in the background, even made awkward small talk. I trusted her instantly. She sent me the deposit, moved in the following week. Or at least, she said she did. For the first few days, we texted occasionally. "Everything's great, thanks. Love the neighborhood. Do you mind if I move the desk near the window?" Then, after a few weeks, the tone changed. "Did you ever hear knocking in the walls? Your bathroom mirror looks warped. Is that normal? The cat keeps hissing at the hallway." I brushed it off. Old buildings make noise. Mirrors distort. Cats freak out. But then one night, I got a message at 3:11 a.m. "Who's staying in the other room?" I texted back. "There is no other room." No reply. The next morning, she sent a photo. It was my apartment, the living room, lights on, furniture exactly where I'd left it. Except there was a door I didn't recognize, on the far wall, between the bookcase and the window. It wasn't there before. "It opened last night," she wrote. I called immediately, no answer. 2 hours later, she texted again. I heard someone talking in there. I thought it was you. I told her to get out, call the police, whatever she needed to do. She said she would, but she never sent another message. When I got back from my trip, I expected the apartment to be empty. It wasn't. The door was still there, right where she'd said. It didn't match the rest of the wall. The paint around it was older, cracked like it had been sealed shut years ago. The knob was cold, too cold. I opened it slowly. Inside was a small, windowless room, empty except for one thing, a phone charger on the floor. Plugged in, still warm. I called the landlord immediately. He said the apartment had never been sublet, said the key I'd left with Claire was never picked up. And when I checked my messages again, every text from her was gone. No thread, no number, nothing. I even tried searching her email. The address didn't exist. It was like she'd never been there. But the weirdest part, when I walked back into that new room, I saw something faint on the wall. Words written in small, careful handwriting. Stop subletting. Underneath that, another line. I'm not the first one. That night, I heard the knocking for the first time. It came from inside the new room. Slow, deliberate. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. When I opened the door, the sound stopped. The air inside was freezing. The walls looked darker, like something had seeped through from the other side. And when I turned to leave, I saw my reflection in the TV screen. Only it wasn't me. It was someone else, standing exactly where I was, smiling faintly, just a second out of sync. I moved out the next morning, but when I came back to drop off the keys, the door was gone. The wall looked untouched. The new tenant, a young guy named Evan, asked if the place had any problems. I almost said no, but something in his expression, eager, trusting, made me stop. If you hear knocking, I said, don't answer. He laughed. What ghosts? Something like that. A few weeks later, I got an email, no subject line. It was a photo of the apartment taken from the doorway. The door was back, and this time it was open. Inside, you could see someone standing just out of frame, a woman, wearing the same sweater Claire had worn during our video call. At the bottom of the photo, a single line of text. You left the charger. I deleted the email, blocked the address, and tried to forget it ever happened. But every few months, someone reposts my old Craigslist ad. Same title, same price, same photos I took 3 years ago. I report it. It disappears. Then it comes back again, posted by a different account. Last week, I noticed something new in the latest version. A photo of the living room, and on the far wall, that same door. Open again. And in the mirror above the couch, you can see someone sitting at the desk, typing on a laptop. If you zoom in, you can see the screen clearly. The page open on Craigslist, and the ad they're typing. My name, my phone number, my apartment. If you ever rent your place out to someone from Craigslist, and they seem too normal, too calm, check your photos later. Because sometimes, you're not the one posting the ad anymore. Sometimes, you're the one being rented out. Story 7. The Locked Basement Roommate. Every roommate story starts with a deal. Cheap rent, shared space, easy rules. But the worst ones start with the words, don't go downstairs. In 2018, I was broke and desperate for a place to live. My best friend sent me a Craigslist ad that seemed perfect room for rent. $500 a month, basement level, private entrance. It sounded ideal, a quiet basement all to myself. When I showed up, The owner, Mark, met me at the door. He was in his 40s, polite but oddly formal, like he was interviewing me for something serious. The house was big old wood floors, thick curtains, the smell of lemon cleaner everywhere. He took me downstairs to show the basement room. It was simple: a bed, desk, mini fridge, small bathroom. "You'll have your privacy," he said. "Only rule the door at the end of the hall stays locked." He pointed to a heavy metal door with a sliding latch. No label, no handle on my side. "What's behind it?" I asked. "Old storage," he said. "You don't need to worry about it." For the first week, it was fine. The place was quiet, maybe too quiet. I barely saw Mark. He left meals at the top of the stairs sometimes, said he didn't like people cluttering the kitchen. It was weird, but rent was cheap, so I told myself not to care. Then, one night, I woke up to a sound. 3 knocks, coming from the metal door. I froze, waited, nothing else. The next morning, I told Mark. He didn't react, just smiled slightly. "Pipes shift down there sometimes," he said. "Don't lose sleep over it." But the knocking didn't stop. Every night, around the same time, 2:17 a.m. 3 knocks, pause, then 3 more. Sometimes it sounded closer. Once, it came from right beneath my bed. A few nights later, I woke to find the light in the hallway on. I was sure I'd turned it off before sleeping. The metal door was slightly open, just a crack, enough to see a faint light coming from the other side. I stepped closer. The air coming through was cold and smelled like wet dirt. I whispered, "Hello." Something whispered back, my name. Not a question, a statement. Then the door slammed shut. The next day, I confronted Mark. He sighed like he'd been expecting it. "I told you to leave that door alone," he said. "It's not safe." "What's behind it?" He looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "My last tenant." I laughed nervously. He didn't. "They signed the lease, same as you, but they broke the rule." "What happened to them?" "They stopped paying rent." That was all he said. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt louder, every creak like a whisper. Around 2:17, the knocking came again, but this time, it didn't stop. Bang, 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 over and over, faster, harder. I grabbed my phone to record it, but when I hit record, the sound stopped instantly. Then a text appeared. From an unknown number. "Don't open it this time." I dropped the phone. When I picked it up, the message was gone. I decided to leave the next morning, started packing before sunrise. But when I tried to go upstairs, the door to the main floor was locked. I called for Mark. No answer. I tried again. Still locked. And then I heard the sound again, not knocking, but scraping, like nails dragging across metal. "Coming from the door." The light above me flickered once, then went out. And in the dark, I heard breathing. When I shone my phone flashlight at the door, I saw something I'll never forget. A hand, pale, thin, pushing through the small gap at the bottom of the metal door. The fingers bent wrong, like they'd been broken and reset over and over. They clawed at the floor, scraping the concrete until I screamed. Then a voice whispered from the other side, "You're next." I don't remember running. I just remember waking up outside, on the front lawn, in the cold dawn light. My bag was beside me, but my phone was gone. The basement door behind the house was padlocked shut. Mark was standing at the window, watching me leave. He didn't wave. A week later, I tried to find the listing again. It was gone, completely erased from Craigslist. I filed a report with the police, but the address didn't match any rental records. The house wasn't listed as a residence. It wasn't even in the county database. 2 months later, I got an email from an unknown address. The subject line just said RE basement room. There was one attachment, a short video. It showed the basement, the same bed, the same metal door. But this time, the camera was shaking. Whoever was filming kept whispering, "It's open!" They turned the camera toward the door. And inside, I saw myself sitting on the bed, looking up, smiling. The video ended there. When I tried to replay it, it was gone, deleted automatically. And when I checked my reflection in the laptop screen for half a second, I saw the same expression myself, smiling faintly, in a room that wasn't mine. I moved again, to another state this time. New number, new job, no Craigslist. But sometimes I wake up around 2:17 a.m. and I swear I hear that same sound 3 knocks from somewhere deep beneath the floorboards. I don't move. I don't speak. Because I know now that some rooms aren't meant to be rented. They're meant to keep something in. Every roommate story starts with hope. You move in, split the rent, maybe even share meals or a laugh or two. But some Craigslist roommates don't move in. They arrive. They bring their secrets, their obsessions, their darkness, and they leave it behind when they go. The quiet man who never slept, the girl with the mirror she refused to uncover, the door across the hall that opened on its own, the switch, the ad, the phantom subletter, and the locked basement that was never empty. Each story had one thing in common: someone ignored the warning signs. It's easy to think it'll never happen to you, that your roommate will be normal, harmless, human. But late at night, when you hear footsteps that don't match your breathing, when you see a door that wasn't there yesterday, when you realize someone's still paying rent long after they've disappeared, remember these stories. Because every roommate starts as a stranger, and sometimes they don't leave when you do. Thank you for listening to these 7 true Craigslist roommate horror stories that will terrify you. If you've ever shared a home with someone who didn't feel quite right, you're not alone. These stories aren't just about bad roommates. They're about the spaces we invite people into and how those spaces remember them, even when we try to forget. Sleep light tonight. Check the locks. And if you ever find a Craigslist ad that feels too perfect, too quiet, too cheap, close the tab. Because some rooms aren't looking for roommates. They're looking for replacements.